In a forgotten corner of Yucatan, past plazas overrun with vines and cicadas, stands a small Franciscan library whose walls still smell faintly of lime and sea. There, beneath shelves bowed by humidity, rests a map that no one has dared to open in a century. Its leather case is scarred with candle soot. A faint impression of a serpent coils around the clasp. Scholars believe it was drawn around 1521, perhaps by a friar who had traveled with Cortez, perhaps by one who repented. Its pigments were traced in crushed malachite, ochre, and cochineal, colors sacred to the scribes of Chichen Itza, and when a lamp is brought too close, the ink seems to breathe, as if the earth beneath the paper were still alive. The map does not resemble the orderly grids of the European world. The rivers wander as though seeking their own birthplaces. Mountains curve like ribs beneath clouds of ink. At the edges, instead of oceans, there are words written in the Mayan hand. Kayan Ikem, the sun that sleeps. No compass marks direction. Instead, a spiral symbol repeats at the corners, the same carved on temple lintels at Uxmal and Kaaba, where astronomers once watched Venus disappear and return. Those who have studied it whisper of contradictions. The Rio Usumacinta runs north, into saltwater that should not exist. A chain of islands appears west of the Gulf, though none are known. The heart of the map is marked by a dark circle filled with gold leaf that has tarnished to green. Beneath it, in faded Latin, someone has written, Via ad lucem per umbrum, the road to light through shadow. The library's records mention that the map was first catalogued by a young archaeologist from Merida in 1887. He compared its rivers to the geography of Guatemala and Belize but found no fit. 2 months later, he vanished into the Petén jungle, leaving only his field journal, where the last page reads, "The land moves when the eyes are closed." His disappearance joined a longer chain of losses that seem to follow the map wherever it travels. In recent years, scientists have examined it under ultraviolet light. Hidden lines emerged, faint crimson channels that align, astonishingly, with the cenote networks beneath Chichen Itza. These are the sacred wells the ancients believed led to Xibalba, the underworld of mirrors. The ink used to trace those subterranean paths contains flecks of magnetite, a mineral that responds to magnetic fields. When exposed to the compass, the needle trembles, as if drawn toward something below the surface. The friars who first described the artifact believed it was not a map of land but of passage, a chart of power lines, veins through which spiritual energy moved between temples and stars. In that age, when cartography still blended with theology, to draw the world was to confess belief. Perhaps that is why the serpent coils at its center, the Mayan can, symbol of the cosmic cord, the road that joins sky to soil, gods to breath. Across the centuries, the parchment has endured moisture, fire, and silence. Its edges are curled, as though resisting the light. Yet each fold reveals not coordinates, but a rhythm. Coastlines shaped like syllables, rivers that resemble writing more than water. To follow them is to travel inward, not across. The old stories tell of Akinab, the sun priests who memorized the paths of stars long before telescopes existed. They said the world was not discovered, but remembered, one dream at a time. There are moments, sitting in that quiet library, when the air seems charged. Outside, the cicadas fall still. Inside, the flame bends sideways, as if drawn by an unseen current. The map quivers. Beneath the translucent parchment, another image briefly flickers. A coast inverted, continents reversed, as though drawn from beneath the sea. The scholar watching hesitates to blink. For an instant, he imagines the map breathing, reshaping itself, aligning to a memory too vast for paper. Theories ripple like heat. Some claim it could be connected to the Pyrie Reis map of 1513, where Antarctica appears long before it was seen. Others trace its design to the Codex de Xolotl, where migration routes curl into spirals, suggesting not movement through space but through eras. There are even whispers of Olmec influence, the same symbolic spirals etched on basalt heads, eyes half closed as though dreaming the geography of another world. But beyond speculation, the feeling remains that this map is less an object than an invocation. Each line seems to hum with longing, each stain a word erased by centuries of hands. It does not guide explorers. It guides remembrance. Perhaps the friar who copied it felt that same tremor of awe, that sense of touching something older than conquest, older than loss. Perhaps, when he set down his quill, he knew he had redrawn not the new world, but the ancient one beneath it. In the codices of the Chilam Balam, the scribes wrote that the waters hold the words of time. They believed rivers were not merely routes of travel but veins of consciousness, connecting temples to stars, villages to heavens. When the first cities rose, Tikal, El Mirador, Calakmul, they were built near these waters, as if the builders sought to anchor their stories in the same current that fed the earth. The sacred journey of the soul, too, followed the river. From life to death, from voice to silence, from name to remembrance. At night, the jungle breathes heavier. Mist rises from the water, turning the air into silver fog. Somewhere, far upstream, a single torch glows, perhaps a fisherman, perhaps only reflection. The water carries its light onward, stretching it thin until it becomes a line of gold trembling upon the surface. It looks like writing, like an ancient script still unfolding under the stars. Modern explorers navigating these waters have found artifacts tangled in roots, fragments of canoes carved from cedar, ceramic jars sealed with resin, and a pendant of jade carved in the form of a tear. Radiocarbon testing dates it to around 800 CE. The pendant was found wrapped in woven cotton and tied with a single strand of human hair. Some believe it was an offering to the river, perhaps left by someone mourning a lost name. Water, after all, does not forget. Stores everything: ash, pollen, bone, breath. When rain falls, it carries traces of every cloud it has ever touched. When a river bends, it erases and rewrites its own story, but the memory remains beneath the surface. Scientists speak of sediment layers and isotopes. The ancients spoke of souls. Both are true. In the ruins near the Rio Usumacinta, archaeologists found a small stone altar carved with concentric circles, each circle representing a flood, a renewal. In the center was the glyph for Nab, meaning mirror or pool. Water, they believed, was the original mirror of creation. When the gods shaped the world, they gazed into it and saw their own reflection, light and shadow intertwined. To pour offerings into a river was to return that reflection, to remind the world of itself. Even now, when villagers bathe or wash clothes along the riverbank, they pause before entering. They dip their fingers in first, touch their forehead, then whisper their name. It is not superstition. It is a greeting, a way of asking permission to enter memory. The sound of their voices blends with the current, lost almost instantly, yet somehow remaining. If you listen closely at dusk, when the birds fall silent and the river slows, you can hear a faint rhythm beneath the water's surface. Not language, but resonance. Feels like a heartbeat, slow and endless. Perhaps that is what the old stories meant, that the river does not remember words, but essence, the pulse behind them, the echo of being alive. In 2018, when heavy rains exposed new sections of the riverbank near Aguatica, researchers found rows of carved stones that had never seen daylight since the classic period. Each bore the same inscription, a single glyph of flowing lines, translated as Siachub, meaning prayer, but also to pour. To speak and to pour were the same act, language and water indistinguishable. When one prayed, one poured. When one poured, one remembered. The Maya believed the soul's final journey followed a celestial river, the white road of the sky, the Milky Way. The earthly rivers mirrored it. What flowed here below was reflected above. The current carried the dead through darkness to the rising sun, where names were reborn as stars. Perhaps that is why so many temples face east, their stairways leading not upward, but outward, toward light mirrored on water. As night deepens, the caretaker closes the shutters. The candles are nearly gone, their smoke rising in thin blue spirals like ghosts of forgotten breath. The map remains open on the table, edges curling toward the flame. For a moment, the copper glints again, and the serpent's eye catches the light. A low breeze stirs through the room, carrying the scent of salt and rain, as if the sea itself has entered to reclaim its memory. Now, in the quiet hours before dawn, the Yaxa still moves unseen beneath vines and roots. Mist curls above its surface. Somewhere within that vapor, frogs begin to call, and the first heron lifts from the shallows, its wings scattering droplets that glitter like jade dust. The water ripples, reshaping the reflection of the forest, rewriting the story once more. And if one stands long enough at its edge, listening, it begins to sound not like a river at all but like breath, soft, patient, unending. Perhaps that is the oldest secret of all, that every current, every tide, every whisper of rain carries not just the memory of water, but the echo of every name that was ever spoken and loved. And perhaps, when we dream, it is the river calling back, reminding us that nothing spoken with sincerity is ever truly lost. It only changes form, flowing endlessly between silence and song. They found it in a chamber beneath the jungle floor, not in a tomb, but resting upon a woven mat, alone, untouched by human hands for 1,000 years. The mask was carved from obsidian, dark and translucent, its edges sharp as if still breathing fire from the volcano that birthed it. In the glow of a headlamp, its hollow eyes reflected twin points of light, and for a moment, those who stood there felt the strange sensation that it was not they who were looking at the mask, but the mask that was looking at them. It was discovered near Teotihuacan, the city of the gods, once the beating heart of pre-Columbian civilization. Beneath the Great Pyramid of the Sun, archaeologists had followed a tunnel that twisted like a serpent through the bedrock, a passage lined with powdered pyrite that glittered like a galaxy. At its end lay a small antechamber sealed by stone. Inside were offerings, carved shells, fragments of jade, bundles of feathers turned to dust. And at the center, the mask. It was smaller than a human face, yet perfectly proportioned. No mouth, no expression. Only eyes, deep, oval hollows rimmed with silver paint that still shimmered after centuries in darkness. Tests revealed its creation around the year 400 CE, during the city's height, when Teotihuacan was larger than Imperial Rome. Yet the purpose of the mask was unclear. It was too fragile to be worn, too sacred to be buried. Some believed it was meant to see, not to be seen. Ancient chroniclers wrote that the priests of Teotihuacan believed obsidian was the skin of the night, solidified shadow. To carve it was to trap reflection itself. They shaped mirrors from its surface to read the sky, to gaze into the past, to summon visions of worlds unseen. The Aztec word for obsidian, itzli, meant not only stone, but sacrifice. It was a material that demanded blood to awaken its light. When the morning comes, the map is gone. Only a scatter of ash remains on the table, fine as volcanic dust. No scorch marks, no trace of theft. The librarian whispers that perhaps it was never meant to be found, that some knowledge survives only by vanishing. The mask's design mirrored celestial maps found on murals nearby. Along its forehead ran inlaid lines of crushed turquoise forming a serpent, the symbol of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered god of wind and dawn. Around its edges, archaeologists found traces of hematite, red as dried fire, used in rituals to symbolize the rising sun. The combination was deliberate. Darkness and light, death and renewal, the eternal breath of the cosmos. At night, the priests carried such masks to the summit of the pyramid and lifted them toward the horizon as Venus appeared. The obsidian caught the faint glow of the star and held it, like a memory of first light. The ceremony was known as Yowaliehecatl, the union of night and wind. Witnesses described how the masks reflected the heavens in miniature, as though each one contained the sky itself. When the wind passed through the temples, it whispered against the glass with a tone like distant flutes. Later, when the Aztecs came upon the ruins centuries after Teotihuacan had fallen, they called it the place where men became gods. They found the shattered remains of these masks scattered among the rubble and believed they were fragments of divine faces. They carried them back to Tenochtitlan, embedding them into statues, shields, and altars, trying, perhaps, to reclaim the gaze of eternity. Modern scientists studying one of these masks under polarized light found something inexplicable. microscopic grooves etched in perfect spirals around the eyes. The pattern resembles the orbital path of Venus as seen from Earth, a five-pointed cycle repeating every 8 years. How could artisans, without lenses or compasses, have known such precision? Some say it was coincidence. Others believe they did not calculate it. They heard it, listening to the rhythm of the heavens translating silence into form. In the Museo del Templo Mayor today, visitors walk past glass cases where obsidian masks lie motionless under halogen lamps. But in the right light, the illusion remains. The black surface captures reflections from the ceiling, flickering like clouds drifting across a darkened sky. The guard says that sometimes, when the museum is quiet, the masks seem to glint on their own, as if responding to unseen stars. The archaeologist who studied the Teotihuacan mask once wrote in her field notes, "When I looked into it, I saw my face dissolve, and behind it, another." She later described recurring dreams of standing atop the pyramid of the sun, holding the mask before her eyes, the wind turning warm, the horizon bending until sky and earth exchanged places. The ancients would have understood. To them, the mask was a threshold, a way to cross between what is seen and what is remembered. The Maya believed that masks allowed one to borrow another's spirit, to step briefly into the body of gods. When a king wore a jade mask during ceremony, it was not disguise. It was transformation. The face ceased to be mortal. The eyes became mirrors of the divine. But the obsidian mask was different. It bore no features, no mouth to speak, no ears to hear. It was not an image of a god. It was the god, the embodiment of perception itself. Through it, one could gaze into the essence of creation, the stillness that lies beneath motion. To look into the mask was to look through the eye of eternity. Perhaps that is why it was buried alone, without a name. Some mysteries cannot be inherited. They must be returned to the earth, to sleep beneath stone until the world is ready to remember. The people who carved it believed the soul traveled upward after death, not to a place of judgment, but to rejoin the sky. Their pyramids were stairways of light, their rituals acts of ascent. The mask, facing heaven from its chamber, may have been placed there to watch, to ensure that the sky remembered its own reflection in the human face. Outside, dawn glows pale over the ruins. In the distance, the jungle breathes, heavy with mist. Somewhere beneath the soil, under layers of stone and silence, rivers still flow according to that unseen design, winding toward the heart of a world that once believed every shadow hid a map, and every map a prayer. In the years following its discovery, the mask traveled briefly to Europe for exhibition. In a darkened hall, beneath controlled light, it was placed upon a pedestal surrounded by silence. Visitors described an odd sensation, that when they approached, the mask brightened slightly, as though responding to proximity. The curator dismissed it as illusion, a trick of reflection. Yet those who lingered longer claimed to see faint movement in the glass, ripples like water disturbed by breath. It was eventually returned to Mexico, to rest once more in shadow. Some say that after its departure, the tunnel beneath Teotihuacan shifted. Sensors recorded minute tremors in the rock, as if the earth itself sighed. Today, the chamber remains sealed. Only the faint glitter of pyrite dust endures, like a frozen night sky under stone. Tourists walk above it, unaware that beneath their feet lies a vault built not for the dead, but for light. The mask that saw the sky sleeps again, yet perhaps it still watches. In dreams, one might stand before it. The darkness would deepen until it becomes weightless, infinite. A single star would appear in each of its eyes, then another, until the mask no longer resembles a face at all, but the cosmos unfolding. And in that reflection, you might glimpse your own outline, brief, luminous, vanishing into the pattern of constellations. Some objects are not meant to reveal secrets. They are meant to return us to silence. Perhaps the mask was never about seeing outward at all. Perhaps it was about teaching the sky to remember us. And when the wind passes through the ruins of Teotihuacan, carrying the scent of dust and rain, it moves as softly as breath, as if the city itself is whispering back to its reflection in the heavens, "I am still watching. In the deep heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, where the air hums with insects and light filters through the canopy like fragments of gold, stands a ceiba tree so immense that it seems to hold the sky upon its branches. Its trunk is pale as bone, its roots curl like serpents through the limestone floor, and its crown dissolves into clouds. The Maya called it Yaxch, the first tree, the one that joins the three realms of the universe: the heavens above, the world of men, and the underworld below. Beneath its roots, the stories say, sleeps a city built in silence, its temples covered by earth and vines, its gates sealed with time. There was once a road that shimmered when the sun touched it, a long pale ribbon of crushed limestone stretching across jungles, swamps, and open plains. It did not belong to any one city, nor end in any single place. It wound across the Maya world, from the temples of Koba to the distant shores of Yaxuna, passing through forests that breathed like lungs. They called it the Sakbi, the White Road. Even today, when the jungle swallows its stones and moss hides its memory, satellites tracing the Yucatan's surface still reveal faint scars of light, straight, unwavering lines, too precise for nature. They are what remains of an ancient network that once bound cities together not with conquest, but with ceremony. The travelers who walked these roads did not rush. They moved slowly, barefoot, their steps softened by time. They carried feathers, long plumes of quetzal and macaw, bright as dawn, iridescent as the sea. The feathers were not trophies or decorations. They were prayers. In the markets of Uxmal, merchants would trade salt for feathers, jade for songbird plumage, obsidian for the glimmer of scarlet macaw tails. But the greatest of these travelers were not merchants at all. They were pilgrims, messengers between worlds, known as the whole Chob, those who walk the light. Each journey was a ritual of balance, a reweaving of the invisible threads that held sky and soil together. Archaeologists have found remnants of these white roads buried beneath centuries of earth. One stretches over 100 kilometers from Koba to Yaxuna, still perfectly straight, even across swamps and hills. Its builders leveled entire forests to lay a path 6 meters wide, covered with crushed limestone that once gleamed under the moon. Imagine it at night, a shining vein through darkness, glimmering faintly under starlight, like the Milky Way reflected on the ground. The Maya saw it as just that, the mirror of the heavens, the earthly counterpart to the celestial road the souls traveled after death. Inscriptions from Chichen Itza speak of these journeys. Pilgrims walking north carried feathers for Kukulkan, the serpent of wind and light. Those heading south bore obsidian for the god of rain. The routes were measured not in distance but in days of prayer, in the rhythm of breath and footfall. Along the way were resting shrines, carved with glyphs of eyes and wind, reminders that each step was being watched by the sky. Some of these roads led to water, to cenotes, the sacred sinkholes that opened into the underworld. Others ended at mountains where temples waited like torches upon the horizon. In both directions, the pilgrims offered feathers. To the depths, they gave what once flew. To the heights, they returned what had fallen. The gesture was a simple symmetry, the giving back of what connects heaven and earth. When the Spanish chroniclers arrived, they asked how the Maya had built such straight roads through the densest jungles. The answer they received was soft, almost a whisper. They followed the birds. It was said that the quetzal, whose green feathers shimmer like sunlight through leaves, never lands on the ground. It lives between worlds, not of sky, not of earth, but the breath between. The priests studied its flight to chart their roads, believing the bird carried the memory of celestial paths. In temple murals now faded to dust, these birds are painted alongside constellations, their wings overlapping with stars. In 1932, archaeologists clearing vegetation near Zabilchilton uncovered a narrow causeway where feathers had been intentionally buried in layers of clay. They were preserved by miracle blue and red macaw feathers, still iridescent. Carbon dating placed them near the end of the Classic period, when droughts and wars began to fracture the great cities. Perhaps the feathers were a final plea, a gift to the sky before silence fell. Travelers once spoke of this tree in whispers. It appears in the accounts of a Spanish friar, Fray Bartolomé de Fuensalida, who wandered through the Petun jungles in 1618 searching for lost Christian converts. His diary tells of a ceiba taller than any tower of Seville, and of ruins glimpsed through the mist, stones carved with eyes that never close. He called the place La Ciudad Sumergida, the drowned city. His guides refused to approach, claiming the spirits of the builders still walked its corridors at night, humming like bees within the walls. Even now, local weavers tell of the Camino de Plumas, the Road of Feathers, a story older than stone. It begins with a single feather dropped from a dying bird and carried by wind across the world. Wherever it lands, a new path appears, invisible but real, leading home to the heart of light. In a remote valley of Chiapas, one can still find fragments of the old Sacbi glinting beneath roots. During the rainy season, when sunlight breaks through clouds, the limestone sparkles faintly, as if remembering its former brilliance. To walk upon it barefoot is to feel something deep and steady beneath your feet. A hum, a resonance, like the slow heartbeat of the earth. The Maya engineers who built these roads aligned them to the solstice sunrise. When the first light struck the white surface, it would glow as though fire ran beneath the stone. Pilgrims gathered in silence, each holding a single feather. When the sun reached its peak, they released them into the air. The feathers rose, caught the wind, and drifted down the road, shimmering in the light like living embers. The act was called Cock's Kin, feeding the dawn. In one of the codices that survived the colonial fires, the Madrid Codex, an illustration shows a procession of figures carrying feathers to a pyramid's base. Above them, the artist painted a spiral sun, encircled by small glyphs for breath and motion. Scholars interpret it as a depiction of pilgrimage, of light carried through darkness and returned to its source. But among the villagers who still live near those ruins, the story is gentler. They say each feather carried a wish, and when it touched the ground, the earth remembered it. That is why the wind still moves so tenderly over the Yucatan plains. It is sifting through old prayers. At night, the jungle quiets, and the ancient road disappears into shadow. Yet under the stars, the pattern remains. The white limestone gleams faintly, and in that dim shimmer, one can almost see the outline of travelers, barefoot, silent, each carrying the brightness of birds through the dark. Archaeologists speak of the Sacbi as engineering marvels, but to those who built them, they were arteries of the spirit. The earth was not dead matter. It was body, breath, and dream. The Road of Feathers was not just a path. It was a conversation between the ground and the sky, a hymn written in stone and color. When modern drones captured the first complete aerial image of the Koba-Yaxuna Road, researchers were astonished. Its course, when viewed from above, forms a near-perfect alignment with the constellation of Cygnus, the celestial swan. Whether coincidence or intention, it completes the circle, the feathered bird above, the feathered path below. And perhaps that is all the ancients ever tried to remind us, that the sky is not somewhere distant. It begins at our feet. When the rains return and the wind rises, Quetzal still pass through the canopy, flashes of emerald vanishing into clouds. Their feathers, when they fall, land softly on leaves or water, floating for a moment before being taken by the current. Somewhere, perhaps along the buried road, they rest for a while, bright, fragile echoes of a time when men followed birds to find the divine. Centuries later, archaeologists tracing satellite imagery over southern Campeche found strange geometries beneath the forest. Outlines of plazas, roads, and reservoirs aligned perfectly with the ceiba's shadow at midsummer noon. The site lies near the ancient trade route connecting Calakmul to El Mirador, cities that once rivaled Tikal in grandeur, now consumed by green silence. They called the discovery Ox Te Na, the House of Three Trees. As night deepens, the forest glows faintly under the moon. Mist curls through the branches, and the sound of insects becomes a kind of rhythm, as if the jungle itself is breathing in time with distant footsteps. Maybe, if you listen closely, you can hear it. The soft brush of feathers against air, the slow whisper of pilgrims returning to the light. And when you close your eyes, perhaps you will see it too. A white road glowing beneath the stars, leading somewhere beyond maps and names. where all journeys end in silence, and every feather becomes a ray of dawn. In the hills of Oaxaca, where mountains fold into one another like waves frozen in time, there lies a cavern that locals call La Cueva del Canto, the Cave of Song. Few dare to enter it. The air inside is cool, sweet, and strangely resonant, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. When rain falls outside and drips through the ceiling into small limestone pools, the cave hums. The sound is soft, haunting, and ancient, a vibration that feels more alive than echo, more memory than noise. Long before anyone could write its name, the people of this valley built shrines inside the cavern. Fragments of pottery, jade beads, and carved stones have been found there, wrapped in woven fibers turned to dust. On one stone, smooth and pale as bone, archaeologists discovered a pattern of spirals etched in careful lines. When they tapped it with a stick of cedar, gently, like a heartbeat, the stone sang. Its tone was clear, low, and sustained, like the hum of a distant shell. It was not coincidence. The stone was shaped to do this. It was an instrument of the earth. Among the Zapotecs, sound was more than music. It was prayer, transformation, the invisible thread between flesh and sky. Their temples at Monte Alban were aligned to catch the wind, their stairways built with acoustic precision. When a priest spoke at the base of the Great Plaza, his voice carried to the farthest terrace as if borne by invisible hands. Modern engineers have measured this effect and found the same frequencies echoed in the cave's singing stone. It is said the priests once brought offerings here at the start of the planting season. They carried jars of maize and honey, and at the center of the ritual stood the stone. They struck it not with force, but with rhythm, slow, deliberate, like a heart remembering how to beat. The sound rose through the chamber and mingled with dripping water, with the rustle of bats, with the deep silence of the mountain. It was a symphony of the living world, each tone feeding the next. At dusk, when the jungle begins to breathe in blue light, the ceba's roots glisten with moisture. One could almost believe the stories that water flows upward through them, carrying memories instead of sap. Beneath the soil, the archaeologists found fragments of obsidian mirrors, jade beads, and shells carried from distant coasts. All bore the same symbol, a spiral within a circle, the mark of the sky road, the path souls took when they returned to the stars. The Mixtec people who later came to this land called such stones nuhu, meaning breathing. To them, rock was not lifeless matter. It was the body of ancient beings who had turned to stone in order to preserve their voices. When the wind moved through mountains, it was those buried voices speaking again. To strike the stone, then, was not to create sound, but to awaken it, to remind the earth of its own music. In 1978, during excavations near Mitla, researchers uncovered several slabs of volcanic basalt carved with hollow chambers on their undersides. When struck, each produced a distinct note. Placed together, they formed scales, a lithophone, a stone orchestra built centuries before the concept of instruments was written. Some were shaped like jaguars, others like serpents, their mouths open as if singing. Sound engineers who tested them found the frequencies corresponded to resonant chambers of the human chest and skull. The ancients had literally built an instrument that resonated with the body. It was not for entertainment. It was medicine. The Zapotec healers spoke of yoho-ho, the echo of health. They believed illness began when a person's internal tone fell out of harmony with the earth's vibration. The singing stones restored that balance. To stand before them was to feel one's own pulse slow, the breath lengthen, the boundaries between body and world dissolve. In colonial chronicles, Spanish friars wrote of pagan caves where devils speak through rocks. They could not imagine that the sounds they feared were simply the mountain's way of remembering itself. Some friars destroyed the entrances, others walled them with crosses. Yet the echoes continued beneath the surface. Sound cannot be buried. Today, when villagers approach the cave, they still leave offerings, copal resin, water, or maize. Some bring conch shells and blow them softly at the entrance. The two tones, shell and cave, merge, forming a trembling resonance that travels deep underground. Listeners say it feels like a sigh from the world's first dawn. Acoustic archaeologists studying these sites have noted how their geometry amplifies natural harmonics. The caves are tuned not by accident but by design. The ancients shaped chambers to reflect certain frequencies, much like modern concert halls. The result is a sustained hum that can last several seconds after a sound is made. When many voices sing together, the vibration becomes physical. It ripples across skin, through bone, through thought. Imagine it. A gathering of people beneath torchlight, faces glowing amber against the stone. The air thick with incense, the smell of earth and resin. A priest touches the stone, and the first note rises, deep, steady, a sound that seems to come from everywhere at once. The people answer with their breath, humming softly, merging with the tone until the whole chamber trembles with living resonance. The torches flicker. Shadows ripple along the walls like water. No one speaks, yet every heart is heard. It may have been such a ceremony that gave the stone its name. Over generations, the sound became a legend, the stone that sang. When the rains failed, people said it was because the stone had gone silent. When it echoed after storms, they said the earth had found its voice again. In 2015, researchers recording in the cave captured something remarkable. When they played back the audio at high speed, they heard not a single tone, but layers of overtones, hidden notes within notes, forming chords similar to those found in flutes made of bone from the same period. It was as if the stone carried the memory of instruments that had vanished centuries ago. Those who worked there spoke of strange sounds underground. The sensors used to measure humidity picked up rhythmic pulses, faint but steady like a heartbeat. Locals said it was the city breathing. The elders of nearby villages came with offerings of copal and maize, murmuring that the foreigners were disturbing the dream of their ancestors. When they burned incense at the Seba's base, the wind shifted, and the forest grew utterly still. But perhaps that is the point. The stone does not imitate us. We imitate it. Every drumbeat, every chant, every note we create is an echo of that first vibration, the one that shaped matter from silence. Some physicists now speak of string theory, of cosmic vibrations that hum beneath all existence. The ancients may have felt this truth long before it had a name. For them, music was not art, it was architecture, the structure of the invisible. The singing stone was both teacher and testament. To hear it was to be reminded that the universe is not silent. It is a song unfolding slowly through time. In the late evenings, when the mountain winds rise and pass over the mouth of the cave, the same tone can still be heard. A low, continuous hum that fades and returns with the rhythm of the air. Villagers say it is the stone remembering. Tourists record it, thinking it mere acoustics. But if you stay long enough, if you close your eyes, you will feel it in your bones. That subtle vibration, steady as the pulse of sleep. Perhaps that is why the ancients built temples atop hills, aligned to stars, and filled them with instruments of clay and stone. They were tuning themselves to the world, harmonizing with the vast music that carries both life and death in its rhythm. And when you leave the cave, stepping into the soft blue night, the scent of rain heavy on the wind, the silence that follows is not silence at all. It is the echo of something immense, retreating into the earth's heart, waiting for another breath, another note, another listener. Somewhere, beneath layers of soil and time, the stone still waits. Perhaps it sings only when no one is there to hear. Or perhaps, in the half-dream between waking and sleep, we hear it again. The mountain's quiet lullaby, reminding us that the world has never stopped humming. At the edge of the desert, where the dunes of northern Mexico begin to swallow the horizon, there stands a gate that no one built, or so the people say. It rises from the rock itself, two pillars of sandstone joined by a lintel worn smooth by wind. The shape is too perfect to be natural, yet no tool marks remain. Travelers call it La Puerta del Sol que duerme, the gate of sleeping suns. To walk beneath that tree is to feel watched. Its bark is smooth and cool, its branches clothed with orchids and bromeliads that drip with water after rain. The air tastes of stone and sweetness, and every sound, a distant bird, a drop of water, seems magnified, sacred. As you approach the roots, the ground softens. The leaves underfoot form spirals, and the soil smells faintly metallic. Then, almost imperceptibly, the forest floor begins to descend, step by step into shadow. When the day ends, and the desert turns to gold, the gate glows faintly, as if holding light inside its stone. No settlement lies nearby, no road leads to it. Only a dry riverbed winds past, filled with the fossils of ancient shells, reminders that this was once the floor of a vanished sea. Beneath the dust, shards of pottery and turquoise beads have been found, their glaze dulled by centuries of wind. Each bears the same glyph, a circle split in two, one half black, one half gold. Sun and shadow, life and rest. Archaeologists first recorded the site in the 1920s, noting its uncanny alignment with the setting sun of the equinox. When twilight comes, the orb of fire descends precisely through the open gate, filling its frame with molten light. For a few breaths, the sun appears to stand still, as if hesitating before crossing. Then it vanishes. The desert cools, and silence falls like sand. Legends across the region, from the Tarahumara to the vanished peoples of Paquim, speak of a portal through which the day entered the underworld. They said that when the sun grew weary, it came to rest beneath this gate, sleeping until reborn. Each dawn was not a rising, but a remembering. In one story recorded by early friars, the sun was once a man, a traveler who carried fire on his back. He walked the world endlessly until he found the place where the earth ended. There, he laid his burden down and stepped through stone into dream. The flame he left behind became the next day. When archaeologists excavated near the gate, they found fragments of offerings, copper bells, obsidian blades, and shells brought from the distant Gulf. Among them was a single piece of carved alabaster, shaped like an eyelid half-closed. It now rests in a museum in Chihuahua. Under lamplight, the eyelid seems to shimmer faintly, as if on the verge of opening. During solstice observations, researchers noted something else. At the exact moment the sun disappears within the gate, a second glow appears beneath the horizon. A subtle, diffuse radiance that lingers for several minutes, long after twilight should have faded. Instruments record it as residual refraction, but the locals call it La Respiration del Sol, the sun's breath. The desert holds many silences, but this one is different. When night comes, the temperature drops sharply, and sound travels farther. From the nearby cliffs, even the rustle of sand can sound like whispering. Some say the gate hums faintly, a vibration felt through the soles of the feet rather than heard. The Bedouin of other lands might call it mirage. Here it is memory, the earth echoing its own warmth back into the dark. Ancient astronomers across Mesoamerica watched this rhythm closely. The builders of Uxmal and Palenque aligned their temples to the sun's journey. Their stairways were calendars, their shadows the measure of eternity. The Gate of Sleeping Suns may have been part of that same network, a western altar to balance the rising sanctuaries of the east. Where the pyramid of Kukulkan celebrated dawn, this stone framed dusk, the inhalation after the exhale. Traces of red pigment along the pillars suggest it was once painted. Half the gate white, half ochre, divided down the center. As the sun passed through, its light would briefly merge the colors into gold, uniting night and day. It was, perhaps, not a temple but a clock of faith, a device for remembering that endings are only transformations of light. Every year, a few pilgrims still come. They arrive at dusk carrying small bowls of maize, salt, and water, the elements of life. They wait in silence until the horizon begins to burn. As the sun slides into the gate, they whisper the names of their ancestors into the wind. The sound disappears immediately, carried away, but they believe the gate keeps it, storing every voice within its hollow core until dawn returns. Beneath the roots lies a narrow opening, half hidden by vines, a sinkhole leading into limestone caverns. The explorers who entered described walls coated with crystals, shimmering like stars reflected in water. Inside, the air was cool and heavy. The beam of their lamps caught carvings of serpents, maize gods, and celestial birds, their outlines almost erased by centuries of dripping mineral. The passage sloped downward into chambers where ancient stairways emerged from rock, their steps worn but intact. Sometimes, in the stillness that follows, the air trembles. The heat leaving the stones rises in waves, making the horizon blur. The line between heaven and earth dissolves. It is then, they say, that the gate opens, not outward but inward. There is evidence that ancient peoples once charted the journey of the sun as the passage of a soul through the underworld. In the codices of Tanalp Wali, the day signs move like stages of descent. Serpent, skull, movement, flower. Death is not an end but a folding of time, a rest between breaths. The sleeping sun mirrors the human spirit, both crossing into shadow to regain their strength. When scientists measured the minerals of the gate, they found the sandstone embedded with small flecks of magnetite, a naturally magnetic iron. Over millennia, the stone has aligned itself to the planet's field. It faces perfectly west, as if drawn by the compass of the world itself. Perhaps that is why animals pause when they pass it. Birds circle above it in spirals before continuing. Even silence obeys its gravity. At night, when the stars appear, they gather precisely above the lintel, forming a constellation the ancients once called a how, the resting sun. Among its points is the red heart of Antares, which the Maya linked to the fire of renewal. In certain seasons, Antares sinks through the gate just before dawn, as if returning the sun's spirit to the sky. One evening, an old ethnographer camped near the site described awakening to a strange light. The gate, though moonless night surrounded it, glowed softly from within, not bright, but steady, like embers in stone. He approached but felt a wave of heat radiating outward, as if the rock itself were exhaling. When he touched it, the warmth was real. In the morning, the stones were cold again. Perhaps it was illusion, or perhaps, as the villagers believe, the sun does not truly sleep beyond the world. It rests inside it, curled like flame within ash. As dawn nears, the desert begins to breathe again. The horizon lightens from violet to silver. Wind stirs through dry grass. The first ray touches the top of the gate, then slides down its pillars like a blessing. The stone warms, and for an instant, its surface gleams with faint reflection, a memory of gold. The day returns quietly. No trumpets, no noise, only the slow rebirth of warmth. Maybe that is how it has always been. The sun dying each evening not in defeat, but in trust, certain that someone will be waiting to witness its return. The ancients built monuments to that trust, to the faith that light, once lost, always finds its way back. And so the gate of sleeping suns still stands, wind-scoured and silent, holding the horizon in its arms. In one chamber they found the remains of a fresco still faintly visible. A ceiba tree painted across an entire wall, its branches reaching into a blue-green sky, its roots sinking into a mirrored lake. Around it stood figures with masks of jaguar and owl, their hands raised toward the trunk as if in prayer. Beneath the mural, a single glyph repeated again and again. No tun, great stone, the word for both temple and body. If you stand there at dusk, you may feel what they felt, the gentle pull of the west, the sigh of the world turning toward rest. And when the last light passes through the gate, and the desert falls into blue shadow, you may find yourself whispering a name you did not know you remembered. Then comes the quiet, vast, soft, infinite. And in that quiet, the world itself seems to close its eyes. Night folds across the continent like a slow tide of velvet. From the jungles of the Yucatan to the deserts of the north, silence ripples through stone and root. The rivers still move beneath their blankets of mist. The ceiba trees hum softly in their sleep, and far beneath the earth, a single drop of water falls, as it has fallen for 1,000 years. The map lies open again in memory, though its ink has turned to shadow. The lines that once led across mountains now fade into breath. The cities that shone beneath moonlight sink into soil. The temples, the feathers, the masks, all of them dissolve into the same quiet rhythm. Dust inhaling light, stone exhaling time. Each chapter, each story, each ruin was only a fragment of a greater voice, the the voice of a world that once listened more than it spoke. A civilization that measured eternity not in conquest, but in rhythm. They built calendars that breathed with the stars. They carved mirrors to teach the sky to see itself. They made instruments from the bones of mountains, roads from the wings of birds, prayers from the rustle of corn. And even now, their silence speaks. If you walk through the forest at dusk, you may feel it, that subtle resonance beneath your heartbeat. The same vibration that trembled in the singing stone, that moved through the gate of sleeping suns, that lingered in the obsidian eyes of the mask beneath Teotihuacan. The old songs have not ended. They have only changed frequency, too low for impatience to hear, too slow for daylight to notice. The ancients understood that nothing truly vanishes. Every step, every whisper, every offering is remembered by the earth. The rivers carry names. The winds carry prayers. The stars carry the rhythm of 1,000 forgotten drums. Time does not erase. It folds soft as breath, sacred as sleep. The archaeologists recorded the images and left. The next morning, the fresco had vanished, covered by a thin new layer of mineral deposit, as though the cave itself had drawn a curtain over its secrets. The footage remains, yet even the recordings flicker strangely, the colors shifting as if remembering a different light. And so, as the last candle burns low, the journey closes where it began, in quiet wonder. The map that led into shadow has burned away, yet its ashes glow faintly, tracing the outline of something vaster. Not a lost world, but a living one. It beats beneath our feet. It waits in the pause between words. It sleeps in the same rhythm as the heart. Perhaps the ancients never disappeared at all. Perhaps they simply became the silence that guides us toward dawn. So let the world grow dim now. Let the wind carry the last ember of sound. Beneath the sky of infinite memory, all that was sacred still breathes. And as you drift toward sleep, the earth whispers the only truth it has ever known. Nothing is lost. Everything returns. Some believe the city beneath the Ceiba was not built in the Age of Kings but much earlier, perhaps during the pre-classic period, more than 2,000 years ago. The alignment of its causeways suggests an astronomical design. The roots of the Ceiba point north toward the star Deneb, once the pole star in ancient skies. Its branches, if extended, would trace the Milky Way, which the Maya called the White Road, the celestial mirror of the path the dead must cross. In their cosmology, the Ceiba was both axis and bridge. It sapped the river of souls. In the rainy season, when thunder rolls and the sky opens like a wound, the Ceiba glows with lightning. This crown catches the storm, grounding the heavens into earth. Those who have camped near it speak of dreams that feel like descent. Staircases spiraling downward, corridors of green light, voices that murmur in a language of wind and stone. When they awaken, they find small glyphs etched in the soil beside their tents, symbols matching those carved on stelae now resting in museums. The sign for rebirth. The Ceiba stands not as relic, but as witness. It has seen empires rise and vanish beneath its roots. Olmec traders carrying jade from Veracruz. It saw lords building canals to feed their sacred lakes. Conquistadors dragging crosses through swamps of mosquitoes and grief. When the Spanish felled forests to raise missions, the Ceiba was spared. Even the friars feared to touch it. They wrote in their chronicles that the natives knelt before it not as idol, but as memory, the memory of balance, when sky and soil still spoke the same tongue. There are moments at twilight when the clouds turn violet and the Ceiba's trunk gleams white against the dark. Birds settle among its branches, hundreds at once, their cries echoing like forgotten names. The roots pulse with light from fireflies, tracing patterns across the ground that resemble ancient constellations. Standing there, one feels time loosen, the centuries collapsing like waves into one another, the breath of the forest synchronizing with the breath of the listener. Perhaps the city still exists beneath that tree, not as ruins, but as reflection. Perhaps the stones have absorbed so much silence that they now dream in their own language, too slow for human ears. The archaeologists never found an entrance large enough to excavate safely. The sinkhole collapsed after the last expedition, sealing whatever lay below under tons of limestone. Some say the Ceiba closed its roots around the city to protect it, folding time inward like a leaf returning to bud. In the nearby village, elders still leave offerings at dawn: maize, cacao, and water in clay bowls. They say the Ceiba feeds on remembrance. If forgotten, it will wither, and the balance between worlds will fade. When asked what balance they mean, they only smile and point to the horizon, where the sun rises through mist that smells faintly of stone and salt. The same horizon where once, they say, a white city shimmered like a reflection too bright to look upon. And so the story rests half history, half breathing myth. A map that leads not outward, but downward, into the veins of the earth. A tree whose roots cradle a civilization that may still be dreaming beneath it. As night deepens, the Ceiba's branches disappear into darkness, and only its silhouette remains. A single column between worlds, holding the sky in quiet devotion. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps some cities live not in space, but in silence, waiting for those who remember that the road to heaven begins underground. In the highlands of Guatemala, where mist curls around volcanic peaks and mornings rise in silver silence, there stands an ancient observatory of stone, half buried, half awake. Its stairways climb into nothingness. Its walls align with the sun, yet seem to have been built for the stars. They call it Quirigua, though the name is only a shadow of what it once meant. Between its glyph-carved monoliths, time itself feels heavy, as though each stone were counting softly without end. The Maya did not measure time as men measure minutes. They measured breath, the breathing of the world, the inhalation and exhalation of the sun. Their priests believed that to know time was to speak the language of gods, to balance the heartbeat of heaven against the rhythm of earth. The oldest surviving fragments of their calendar, carved on stele at Izapa and San Bartolo, still pulse with that purpose. Circles within circles, days within worlds. Each glyph carried its own spirit. Amix, the crocodile, who swallowed beginnings. Ik, the wind that brought thought. Ekebal, the house of night, where dreams first learned to walk. 20 sacred day signs spiraled through 13 heavens, forming the Tsokin, a calendar of 260 days. A cycle not of commerce or war, but of creation. It marked the intervals between seed and harvest, birth and naming, rain and silence. No day was ordinary. Each was a living being, an echo of the god's own breath. In the temple courtyards, astronomer priests watched Venus rise before dawn. They traced its shimmering path across the horizon and marked each return with carved numerals. Venus was the herald of both war and renewal. When it vanished, kings fasted. When it returned, fires were lit. The priests of Köppen recorded its cycles in stucco reliefs, aligning the planet's 584-day orbit with the sacred count. Their precision was astonishing, within seconds of modern astronomical calculation. Yet they claimed no ownership of knowledge. For them, the sky was alive. They were not observers, but participants. To build a calendar was to build a bridge between breath and eternity, between the gods who created the world and those who would one day remember it. The Maya measured not time itself, but its silence, the space between heartbeats, between one dawn and the next. Each rotation of their calendar was a circle of becoming. Worlds died, and others began, all inscribed within numbers that spoke more truth than words could. In Palenque, beneath the tomb of Pakal the Great, an entire cosmology lies carved in limestone. The sarcophagus lid, often misunderstood, is not a portrait of death, but of motion. A ruler falling through the tree of life, returning to the roots of the Ceiba, to be reborn when the stars align. The calendar carved around him stretches backward and forward beyond history, into thousands of years that no human memory can hold. For them, eternity was not endless time, but time folded perfectly upon itself. When archaeologists unearthed the long count inscriptions at Quirigua, they realized something extraordinary. The Maya did not begin their time with the birth of kings or empires. They began it on a day they called 13.0.0.0.0, August 11th, 3114 BCE, according to our reckoning, the day the world was created from darkness. The count continued through cycles of 144,000 days, each called a Bacton. The stele recorded these numbers not to predict apocalypse, as later myths imagined, but to celebrate continuity, the breath that outlives the body, the dawn that follows all endings. In the chamber of the E-group complex at Uxacton, early morning light passes through a narrow slit only twice each year, on the equinoxes. When it does, the beam falls perfectly upon a carved glyph of the maize god, his arms rising from the earth. The alignment is precise to a fraction of a degree, calculated centuries before the first metal compass existed. To stand there at sunrise is to feel the synchronization of all things, stone, light, and thought, returning briefly to their original harmony. The Spanish chroniclers could not comprehend such devotion. They burned codices by the thousands, luminous books painted on bark paper, their glyphs like constellations of meaning. Only 4 survive today: the Dresden, Paris, Madrid, and Grolier codices. The Dresden Codex, rescued by chance, still holds astronomical tables of Venus and lunar eclipses, written in careful columns of red and black. The precision rivals that of Kepler. Each number was a prayer, each calculation an act of faith. To read it aloud is to hear the echo of wind through stone corridors, counting in the rhythm of rain. Even now, highland farmers in Chiapas still consult the sacred count. They plant maize when the day sign breathes through the wind and harvest under can, the ripe sun. They name their children after the day of their birth, believing each soul carries the resonance of its number. The calendar continues, quietly, through their rituals, an unbroken thread from the cities of gods to the villages of dawn. Modern historians call it mathematics. The Maya called it listening. They listened to the slow turning of the heavens, the rustle of maize leaves, the pulse beneath the soil. They believed time itself was alive, that it could hunger or heal, depending on how men remembered it. When the world grew restless, drought, war, eclipse, they performed ceremonies of balance, not to change fate, but to remind time of its own rhythm. Perhaps that is why their stones endure, because they were placed in harmony with the sky. Every temple, every stairway, was tuned to the movement of the sun. The city of Chichen Itza, its pyramid of Kukulkan, is both monument and clock. At the equinox, the afternoon light slides along the pyramid's edge, forming a shadow serpent that descends to the base. Crowds gather to witness it, but few notice how quiet the moment truly is. The serpent's motion is not spectacle, but remembrance, a whisper from stone to sky that the pattern still holds. When the 13th Bacton ended in December 2012, many feared the prophecy of destruction. But for the Maya, such endings were simply thresholds. The number 13 marked completion, not death, but renewal. In their tradition, each cycle collapses into stillness before breathing again. Perhaps that stillness is what the world mistook for apocalypse. The pause between exhalations, when creation waits to remember itself. Somewhere, in the dark halls of the Museo Nacional de Antropología in Mexico City, rests a fragment of carved jade. It bears the glyph for ton, stone, which also means year. The carving is smooth, as if rubbed by centuries of prayer. The museum label reads, "Fragment, origin unknown." Yet when light touches it, faint lines appear, radiating outward like ripples on water. It seems less a relic than a reminder, a small clock that measures not time, but eternity. Imagine holding it in your hand. Feel the weight, cool, calm, deliberate. Close your eyes, and you can almost sense the quiet ticking of the stars above you, each one moving in its ancient rhythm. The night breathes. The world continues its slow rotation. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmurs over the mountains, as it did 1,000 years ago. Time, the priest said, was not a river but a circle. The soul enters, forgets, returns. The gods themselves rise and fall within it. Each dawn a resurrection, each dusk a descent. To count the days was not to master them, but to bow before their perfection, to join the spiral rather than fight it. And so, beneath the ceaseless stars, the calendar still turns. Invisible wheels of stone and sky, rotating in unison. The same Venus rises, the same moon wanes, The same rain falls upon temples swallowed by vines. Perhaps the true measure of eternity is not found in numbers, but in the silence between them, the hush when the breath stops, and the listener hears the echo of creation. Perhaps that was all the Maya ever tried to tell us. That time does not pass, it returns. Deep within the mountains of Oaxaca, beyond the reach of modern roads, a ridge rises like the spine of an ancient god. At its summit stand the remnants of a forgotten sanctuary, walls of black volcanic glass catching the last light of dusk. The locals call it Teoquitla, the place of reflections. Archaeologists know it by another name, the Temple of Mirrors. When sunlight touches the ruins, the stones seem to breathe. The air itself changes, heavy, hushed, expectant. It is not the grandeur of the site that overwhelms, but its silence. No idols remain, no altars, no thrones. Only a single corridor lined with fragments of obsidian, their surfaces polished to a depth so perfect that they reflect not the viewer's face, but the outline of the sky. The first written mention of the temple comes from the 17th century. In the journals of a Jesuit missionary named Andrés de la Peña, he wrote of a mountain whose stones reveal visions, and of villagers who avoided it at night, fearing that the mirrors showed not the present, but what the heart concealed. When he tried to climb the ridge, the clouds thickened, and he returned ill, muttering that the mountain looked back. Centuries later, an expedition led by archaeologist Maria López Castañeda rediscovered the site. Using LiDAR scanning, her team revealed a complex structure hidden beneath forest growth, 3 concentric plazas aligned with the setting sun of the equinox. At their center stood a rectangular hall, its floor once covered entirely with obsidian tiles. Traces of fire-blackened stone suggested rituals involving light itself, the burning of copal resin, the reflection of flames across mirrored walls. Among the artifacts unearthed were dozens of hand-sized mirrors, some framed in jade, others backed with mica. The radiocarbon tests dated them to around 900 CE, during the decline of the Zapotec civilization. Yet their craftsmanship matched older patterns, the obsidian mirrors of Teotihuacan, associated with the deity Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, the god of fate and night. To hold one of these mirrors is to see more than reflection. The surface darkens and deepens until it resembles a pool of water under moonlight. The ancient priests believed such mirrors opened doorways between realms, not illusions, but instruments of communion. Through them they sought not the future but understanding. To look within was to dissolve the self and glimpse the eternal symmetry of all things. The Zapotec word for mirror, nizu, also means eye of the sky. It was said that the gods used mirrors to look upon the earth, and that humans, in turn, used them to remember the divine. The temples of Monte Alban were built with mirror stones placed strategically in walls and altars, so that sunlight at solstice would ignite them like scattered stars. The Temple of Mirrors may have been the last of these sanctuaries, the final place where the dialogue between reflection and flame was kept alive. At sunset, the obsidian turns from black to crimson, catching the color of the horizon. Archaeologists who have worked there describe a strange optical effect. As the light fades, the walls seem to dissolve, replaced by infinite corridors of reflection. One researcher wrote that she could see herself multiply into the distance, each image smaller and softer, until the last disappeared into darkness. It was like watching memory recede, she wrote, as though the stone were returning my life to time. In the myths preserved by the descendants of this land, the god of mirrors was both creator and destroyer. He watched the world through smoke, revealing truths only when men were ready to bear them. His followers did not seek prophecy, but purification, to polish the soul as one polishes the obsidian, removing the dust of illusion. When the surface became flawless, the boundary between self and cosmos vanished. One became reflection itself. In the 1960s, a small fragment from the site was sent to a laboratory in Mexico City. Under magnification, the obsidian revealed thousands of micro-etchings invisible to the naked eye, fine incisions forming spirals, stars, and serpents. Scholars believe they were cut with quartz blades, each groove no thicker than a hair. The precision would have required endless patience, perhaps even trance. The pattern resembles the Mayan Hunab Ku symbol, the motion of creation returning upon itself, a mirror within a mirror. Local oral traditions speak of a time when the temple's mirrors were aligned to reflect the night sky. On certain nights of the year, when Venus rose before dawn, the reflections converged into a single beam of light that struck a stone altar at the hall's center. The priests called it the returning star. Some scientists have speculated that the obsidian's alignment was used to track celestial cycles. Others, that it served as an early meditation chamber, a place to confront the self stripped of all noise. What remains undeniable is the atmosphere of sanctity. Even now, when the wind moves through the ruins, it carries a faint resonance. Not quite echo, not quite voice. Visitors often describe a sensation of being watched, not by spirits, but by the light itself. The human face, reflected in those fragments, appears ancient, soft, distant, almost sacred. When Dr. Castañeda's team concluded their excavation, they covered the mirrors again to protect them from erosion. Before leaving, they lit small candles along the corridor, as the old text suggested. The flames multiplied infinitely, filling the darkness with gentle fire. It was said the temple's purpose was to remind the living that even light requires shadow to be seen. In that flickering corridor, one could almost believe it. Outside, night gathered slowly over the ridge. The jungle stirred, alive with crickets and distant thunder. The candles burned lower, their reflections fading one by one until only the stars remained, distant mirrors scattered across the vault of heaven. The archaeologists stood in silence, feeling the weight of centuries settle softly around them. In that stillness, the distinction between reflection and reality dissolved. Perhaps that is what the builders intended, a place not of worship, but of return. A chamber where man could stand before his own reflection and see the universe looking back. To build such a temple was an act of exquisite humility, to acknowledge that the divine is not above, but within, echoing quietly through every surface of the world. When morning comes, the mirrors are dark again. The ridge glows with dew, the forest exhales mist, and the stones remain indifferent. Yet those who have seen their own faces reflected in that obsidian carry something of it forever. A soft, uncertain clarity, as if they have glimpsed the pattern that binds all breath and silence together. Perhaps the mirrors were never meant to reveal images at all. Perhaps they were meant to teach us how to see. Not with the eyes, but with the stillness that lies behind them. And so the temple endures, half ruin, half vision. The obsidian sleeps beneath soil and roots, waiting for another beam of light, another voice brave enough to look inward. When the stars align again, the reflections may awaken, countless faces of one eternal gaze, shining quietly beneath the skin of the earth. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and the deepest mirrors are not made of stone, but of silence. In the high plains of Oaxaca, where evening light settles like gold dust over the ridges, the wind moves through the fields of maize as if whispering to something unseen. The stalks sway, their dry leaves brushing together in slow murmurs, a sound older than speech. The villagers call it La Voz del Maize, the voice of corn. And they listen. Always they listen. Archaeologists tracing the origins of maize have followed its footsteps through time, from the valley of Tehuacan, where carbonized kernels from 7,000 years ago lie preserved in cave dust, to the terraces of the Zapotecs and the sacred fields of the Maya. They say that before there were temples, before there were kings, there was maize, the plant that learned to grow alongside man, or perhaps it was man who learned to grow beside it. In the Popol Vuh, the ancient book of the Kitch Maya, the gods shaped humanity from dough made of ground white and yellow maize. Our flesh, it says, was kneaded from kernels, our blood from the water that nourished them. We are the children of corn. The elders still say, as though reciting the first truth ever spoken. To harvest it is to repeat the act of creation. To eat it is to remember what we are made of. At dusk, the farmers of San Jose Magoti still perform a quiet ritual before cutting the first ear of the season. They burn a little copal resin, whisper a prayer to the four winds, and touch the soil 3 times with their fingertips. The gesture is small, but its roots reach deep, back to the Olmec priests who built altars shaped like open mouths of the earth, believing maize rose from the underworld each year to feed the sun. The field at night has its own language. The insects hum like distant flutes, the leaves hiss as they bend, and somewhere beneath the rhythm of it all, there is a pulse, faint, steady, like breathing. Those who sleep near the fields swear they dream of footsteps moving between the rows. Some wake to find small patterns in the soil, spirals and handprints, as though something ancient had walked through in silence and left its mark. The scientists call it wind. The villagers call it memory. In 1949, excavations near San Andres Tuxtla uncovered clay figurines depicting women with maize sprouting from their hair. Their faces are serene, their eyes half closed. Traces of red pigment still cling to the corn leaves. Beside them were grinding stones, metates, worn smooth by centuries of ritual use. One figurine held a tiny bowl, and inside that bowl, archaeologists found pollen sealed by time. Under the microscope, the grains still glimmered gold. In ancient cosmology, maize was not just food but a bridge between worlds. Each kernel carried a spirit, Ixim, the seed that dies and returns. The farmers believed that when they planted, they buried a god. When they harvested, they resurrected him. The stalk was the axis of the world, linking underworld, earth, and sky. Even the Maya word for year, Hab, was born from the cycles of sowing and rain. There was a story once told among the elders of Chiapas, that on certain nights, when the moon rose red over the fields, one could hear the ancestors whisper through the stalks. Not voices exactly, but breath, long, slow exhalations moving with the wind. The dead, they said, returned not as ghosts, but as the rustle of corn. To stand among those fields at midnight was to stand within a cathedral of sound, each leaf a tongue, each gust a psalm. Modern researchers recording acoustic data in maize fields have noted something remarkable. The leaves indeed resonate in distinct frequencies when moved by air. At dawn and dusk, when humidity rises, these frequencies fall into a low harmonic hum, audible only to the sensitive ear. The ancients may have noticed this long before instruments could prove it. Perhaps they called it prayer. There is a hill near Mitla where an old ceiba tree overlooks the terraces. Beneath its roots, archaeologists found a chamber carved with murals of maize gods, the male deity Sentiatl, painted in blue and gold, and the female Chicamcotl, her hands filled with 7 ears of corn. The pigments, still vivid after centuries, seem to shimmer when the light of evening touches them. Offerings were found there too. Obsidian blades, conch shells, and small clay whistles shaped like birds. When played, their notes mimic the cry of wind through maize. It is possible that the people once performed ceremonies where the sound of the flutes merged with the field's own music, earth and breath singing together. For the ancient farmers, the harvest was never merely sustenance. It was resurrection. Each kernel placed in the ground was a promise. Each sprout that broke the surface was a fulfillment of that promise. When drought struck, they turned to the rain god Chak, striking stones to call lightning, or to Tlaloc, whose eyes wept the rivers into being. Even today, in small villages, when the first rain falls, people step outside and lift their faces to it, whispering, "Ya vino el abuelo," the grandfather has come. The Spanish friars who witnessed these rituals wrote about them with fear and fascination. Fray Diego de Landa described a ceremony in which the priests offered the first maize dough to the 4 directions, marking each horizon with a different color: white for north, red for east, black for west, yellow for south. At the center, they placed a 5th bowl, blue-green like the heart of jade. This, they said, was the color of balance, the earth's breath. Even after conquest and conversion, maize remained the hidden scripture of the people. When crosses replaced idols, they carved ears of corn at the base of the crucifix. When the churches rose where temples once stood, they planted maize in the courtyards, saying, "Even God must eat." The friars tried to forbid it, but the corn returned, growing between stones and walls, patient as faith itself. In the 20th century, ethnobotanists studying traditional cultivation practices realized how profound this knowledge was. The milpa, a polyculture of maize, beans, and squash, created a self-sustaining ecosystem, the same triad cultivated for over 4 millennia. Its roots prevent erosion, its leaves capture humidity, its diversity protects against famine. The people who tended these fields were not merely farmers. They were stewards of equilibrium. Their rituals, dismissed once as superstition, mirrored ecological truths now rediscovered by science. At twilight, the wind rises again. The cornfields shimmer in the dim light, each stalk bending slightly as if bowing to the horizon. The scent of earth and smoke mingles, tortillas baking somewhere, incense curling upward from a small altar near the field's edge. A woman sings softly while grinding maize on her metate, her rhythm matching the slow turning of the heavens. She is unaware that her song continues an unbroken lineage of prayer stretching back thousands of years. The same cadence, the same devotion. Perhaps, if one listens long enough, the sound of grinding stone becomes indistinguishable from the murmur of the leaves outside. Both are part of the same breath, the earth speaking to itself. Some scholars say the earliest word for prayer in Nahuatl, Tlatlaka, means to make the wind move. If that is true, then every field of maize is a living prayer, every gust of air, every ripple of leaves, a hymn written in the oldest language on earth. When night finally deepens, the cornfields disappear into shadow, leaving only the faint hiss of wind and the rhythmic beat of distant frogs. It is then that the villagers close their doors, whispering the ancient benediction. May the maize sleep and dream of light. Perhaps it does. Perhaps within every kernel, the dream of the first dawn still lingers, the moment when the gods molded humanity from soft dough and breathed life into it, believing that memory and nourishment should be one and the same. And perhaps, as we fall asleep listening to the wind, what we hear is not wind at all, but the oldest sound in the world, the echo of creation, rustling softly through the fields. In the lowlands of Guatemala, where the air is heavy with mist and the soil smells of rain, a river winds through the jungle like a vein of liquid glass. It is not marked on most maps. From above, it appears to vanish and reappear, slipping beneath the forest in long, silent intervals, as though breathing beneath the skin of the earth. The people who live along its banks call it Yaksa, the green-blue water. To them, it is not merely a river. It is a memory that moves. Long ago, before the roads, before the names of kings were carved into stone, the Maya believed rivers were alive, living spirits that carried the words of the dead into the underworld. Every stream was a whisper, every bend a syllable in the language of creation. The elders said that when a person died, their name was given to the river. And if the name was true, if it had been spoken with kindness and purpose, the current would remember it forever. Fragments of this belief still flow through time. Along the Rio Pasión, archaeologists uncovered offerings buried in the silt, shells, obsidian blades, and small jade masks wrapped in cotton. They were placed there more than 1,000 years ago, perhaps by hands trembling with reverence. Each object was engraved with glyphs, not of gods or rulers, but of common people. Traders, scribes, mothers, children. Their names were meant to float upon the current, to be carried onward to the ocean where all souls returned. The riverbanks here are lined with ceiba trees, their roots reaching deep into the dark, waterlogged soil. In the heat of the day, they release a faint sweetness, like wet bark and honey. In their shade lie the remains of temples and stairways now devoured by vines. The city once known as Cancuin slept beside this river, its palaces built from fine limestone that still gleams beneath moss. The glyphs on its steely tell of merchants who traveled by canoe from the highlands to the coast, bearing salt, jade, and feathers. They called themselves Aj Kuhul Ha, the keepers of sacred water. When the first explorers found Cancuin in the late 19th century, they wrote of the river's strange silence. Even the sound of oars seemed muffled. Locals warned them that the river remembers what it sees. Some refused to speak its name after dark. In 2005, when archaeologists excavated a royal palace near the water, they uncovered a burial unlike any other. 45 skeletons arranged in rows, each facing the current, each adorned with small jade beads. The bones belonged not to slaves, but to nobles, The skulls had been marked with glyphs that read simply, "Ha, water." No one knows if it was sacrifice or ceremony. Perhaps both. The river's path winds through layers of time. Far downstream, near the ruins of Siebel, the banks are carved with petroglyphs, spirals, serpents, and symbols for wind and flow. One depicts a figure kneeling with hands cupped, water streaming between them. The carving has been worn smooth by centuries of rain, but the gesture remains. It is the gesture of offering or remembrance. In the rainy season, when the river swells and spills into the forest, it carries with it the scent of wet stone and crushed leaves. Frogs sing. Fireflies drift low over the surface. It is easy to imagine that the water itself hums, a low, melodic vibration, like the faint resonance of a shell held to the ear. Hydrologists studying these waters have noted peculiar acoustic properties. Certain bends in the river produce subharmonic tones when the current slows. The sound is inaudible at first, but with patience, it emerges, a deep, rhythmic murmur, like chanting beneath breath. Perhaps the ancients heard this long ago and believed it was the river speaking.